They called it a suicide run. The human called it an express elevator to the truth. The Valthor Imperium's central healing sanctum rose like a shrine to despair. Its ceiling, a living membrane that mimicked the amber twilight of their homeworld, pulsed faintly, casting long shadows across the bowed heads of 100 advisors. At the room's heart, levitating within a cocoon of whirring diagnostic fields, lay the ancient and beloved Emperor Thalor. His body, a majestic architecture of chitin that gleamed like polished obsidian, supported by 8 graceful limbs, now appeared fragile. The once vibrant crimson of his carapace had faded to a sickly rust, consumed by an ailment that laughed at every instrument. Grand Vizier Kaelin, his own exoskeleton polished to a military sheen, stood before a colossal holographic display. His stance was carved from granite, the living embodiment of protocol and grief. The screen behind him showed a graveyard of contradictory data, cascading lines of code that annihilated each other, anatomical scans that dissolved into snow over the Emperor's core, life sign graphs that jumped like the seismic reading of a planet tearing itself apart. The conclusion is unavoidable. Kaelin spoke. His voice, a precise series of clicks and harmonic trills, filled the hushed chamber. Each syllable landed like a stone sealing a tomb. The sickness consuming his imperial majesty is intelligent. It actively corrupts our deepest scans. It masks itself as healthy tissue, hiding within the Emperor's own biological signals like a wolf in the herd. We occasionally detect a faint energy signature near the thoracic ganglion cluster. But the instant we focus our instruments, it dissolves into white noise. We cannot map it. We cannot fight it. We have exhausted every therapy, every experimental compound, every prayer to the ancestors. He gestured with a slender 3-fingered hand toward a final damning image. A temporal projection showing inevitable decay, spreading from the Emperor's primary nerve cluster. The process is accelerating. At this rate, systemic failure within 4 rotations. We are out of moves. A suffocating silence pressed down on the assembly, bending the advisor's antennae, drooping the heads of medical attendants along the walls. Zara, a junior comparative biologist from the allied Zillion species, felt the weight as a cold stone in her primary stomach. Her people were legendary for their analytical genius. Yet here she stood, helpless before her flickering monitors. Her multifaceted eyes, normally alight with curiosity, were dull with defeat. She had thrown every algorithm, every protocol at the mystery. The universe had answered with a screen full of static. The Emperor's fading life was a personal, professional, and spiritual catastrophe. Grief settled like a physical fog, until everyone flinched as a voice, casual and laced with infuriating irreverence, cut through the stillness. So, check engine lights on, and the hood release is jammed. Anyone got a manual? The voice was human, an acoustic sacrilege. Every advisor turned toward the source. Leaning against a support column near a sealed secondary entrance stood a human male. Average height for his species, clad in a faded charcoal jumpsuit stained with grease, dried rations, and probably both. A tool belt cluttered with scuffed, unidentifiable gadgets hung low on his hips. He chewed on a protein bar with the contemplative rhythm of a man watching a mildly interesting sports replay. This was Jax McAllister, freelancer, professional nuisance, and on rare, desperate occasions, a miracle. You, how did you enter? Kaelin's frill flared with indignation. This is a restricted zone. By the ancestors. 2 Imperial guards, towering figures in ceremonial armor, stepped forward. Their energy pikes hummed to life. Jax ignored them. He finished his bite, wiped his fingers on his thigh, and held up a battered datapad. A shimmering schematic of a small, aggressively ugly spacecraft bloomed in the air above it. Relax your antennae, Kaelin. I'm not here to steal the silver. I'm here with a solution. Kaelin's frill vibrated with outrage. A solution? The greatest minds of 14 systems have failed. What could a grimy, soft-shelled primate possibly offer? Jax grinned. a gesture the Valthor had learned to interpret as a prelude to either genius or arson. A second opinion, from the inside. He thumbed toward the holographic ship. This is the Splinter. Looks like a trash compactor with engines, but she's got a prototype miniaturization rig. Shrinks us down to the size of a blood cell. Your problem? You're trying to read the book from across the library. I'm going to go look at the fine print. The silence that followed was absolute. Advisor's antennae twitched. Mouth parts hung open. The concept was so far outside medical doctrine, so utterly barbaric and crude, that their hyper-advanced minds needed a moment to process. Zara stared, her scientific brain racing through 1,000 catastrophic failure modes: circulatory pressure, immune response, the fundamental instability of shrinking organic matter, textbook disaster. Kalen found his voice first. A low, deadly trill. Seize this clown. He mocks the Emperor's suffering. The guards advanced. Jack sighed. A theatrical sound of long-suffering patience. He didn't reach for a weapon. He tapped a scuffed module on his wrist. A quiet chime echoed, and a high-frequency override code flashed across the guard's helmet displays. An old, deep-level Imperial courtesy chit. From the Emperor himself. The guards froze mid-stride, their programming locking into a confused loop. Freelancer courtesy feature, Jack said, winking at Kalen. Quiet exits and entrances. Works wonders. He turned from the sputtering vizier to the figure in the room's center. He walked forward, boots making quiet, confident sounds on the polished floor, until he stood at the edge of the diagnostic field. He looked at Thalor's frail form. "Hey, big guy," he said, his voice losing its sarcastic edge for the first time. "Heard you caught a bad bug." A low wheezing sound came from the Emperor. A chuckle. Weak, but unmistakable. Kalen's frill vibrated so violently it nearly detached. He spun to face the assembled advisors, limbs spread wide in frantic appeal. "This is an affront to science, to reason, to imperial dignity." His pitch rose. "He proposes to inject a crude metal vessel into the Emperor's sacred bloodstream, to blunder through celestial anatomy like a wrecking ball in a cathedral. This procedure is an elaborate death sentence with the Emperor as an unwilling participant." Jax leaned against the Emperor's diagnostic cradle railing, arms crossed, utterly unperturbed. He waited until Kalen paused for breath, a feat of Valthor biology that took several seconds. "You're thinking about it wrong," Jax countered. "Look, your way is like trying to fix a planetary server network from orbit. You're running scans, bouncing signals, reading faint energy ghosts. But the problem is a single busted router in a basement in the capital city. You can't see it from up there. All your fancy machines are blind because the problem is too small and too smart. So you keep running scans while the whole planet goes dark. Or someone takes the express elevator down to the basement and knocks on the door." He tapped his chest. "I'm the express elevator. It's not a death wish, it's a house call." Kalen stared, his mouth parts agape. The human's analogies were, as always, utterly nonsensical, and infuriatingly clear. His composure cracked under the strain of unadulterated insanity. He spun to face the council, a silent body of esteemed Valthor who watched with frills twitching between horror and fascination. "Listen to him," Kalen implored, pointing a trembling hand at Jax. "He speaks of the Emperor's divine physiology as if it were a faulty data network. He trivializes unimaginable risk with crude metaphors. By the first spawning, the man is deranged." The accusation hung in the air. Deranged. Perfect word. It captured the illogical, chaotic, dangerously unpredictable nature of the human in his proposal. For a moment, the council seemed to agree. A few members trilled assent, frills rustling with shared alarm. Kalen's frill straightened. He had won. Reason would prevail. Then a weak but clear voice sounded from the room's center. "The human's madness has served this empire well before." Kalen froze. All attention turned to the Emperor. Thalor was stirring. With visible effort, he used one of his upper limbs to gesture a medical attendant closer, who adjusted nutrient feeds and vocal enhancers. The Emperor's amplified voice echoed through the chamber, ancient, weary, but carrying absolute authority. I recall a time, Thaler continued, fixing his gaze on Jax, a flicker of amusement in his old eyes, when the scourge of the Karvak Syndicate had our primary trade fleet cornered in the Maelstrom Nebula's collapsing gravity well. Our Grand Admiral calculated survival odds at— what was it, Kalen? Kalen's voice was a whisper. Less than 1 part in 10,000, Your Majesty. Indeed, the Emperor rasped. A statistical certainty of annihilation. All our established methods, our brilliant strategies, our unimpeachable logic, had led us to a dead end. And then, an unauthorized human freighter captain hot-wired the nebula's magnetic containment field using, if I recall the report correctly, a utensil from his ship's galley and a roll of thermal tape. A few younger advisors looked confused. The older ones shifted uncomfortably. Jax grinned. It was a spork and industrial sealant. Stuff works miracles. He used the resulting magnetic pulse to create a temporary stable corridor through the gravity well, Thalor said, his voice gaining strength from the memory. My advisors at the time also declared it utter madness. That act saved 20,000 Valthor lives and the economic stability of this entire sector. He paused, sweeping his gaze across the stunned faces of his council. Our empire has grown old, wise, rigid. We have forgotten that sometimes the only path forward is one absent from our charts. Our logic and science have failed us. Perhaps a little madness is exactly what we need. He turned his full attention back to Kalen, whose frill had wilted completely. High Counselor, you have served me faithfully for 2 centuries. Your caution stems from loyalty, and I honor it. But it offers no solution now. In a voice that left no room for debate, he issued his decree. I sanction the human's proposal. He will have whatever resources he requires. His authority in this matter is second only to my own. Record it. The chamber was silent once more. Kalen bowed his head, defeated. Zara stared at Jax, her mind a whirlwind of terror and a strange, unwelcome flicker of admiration. The Emperor had just handed the insane human a license to kill or cure the most powerful being in the galaxy, and Jax looked about as concerned as if someone had asked him to fix a leaky faucet. The Emperor's diagnostic cradle had been rolled through a sterile conduit into an adjoining bay, transforming the hangar into a controlled surgical theater. The central healing sanctum became an observation gallery, advisors and adepts watching through smart membrane walls and live telemetry as injection drones positioned themselves around the monarch's exposed arm. The splinter squatted in a secondary hangar bay, now sealed and scrubbed as a recovery zone. It looked deeply out of place, less a spacecraft and more a collection of parts flying in loose formation. The hull was a patchwork of mismatched plates, some polished, some scorched black. One landing strut had clearly been salvaged from a different model entirely. It had all the aesthetic appeal of a cinder block. Jax was whistling a tuneless off-key melody as he ran pre-flight checks. His hands moved over the console, flipping switches, twisting dials. A chaotic but efficient sequence amid a nest of exposed wires and custom-built hardware. A small spherical drone hovered over his shoulder, emitting a series of sarcastic beeps that only he seemed to understand. Yeah, I know. Inertial dampers are 30% out of spec, Jax muttered, tapping a gauge with his knuckle. Adds character. Keeps the pilot on his toes. Engrossed in his work, he didn't hear the quiet footsteps on the ramp until a shadow fell over his console. He looked up to see Zara. She held a datapad like a shield, her multifaceted eyes narrowed with grim purpose. Mr. McAllister, she began, her voice tight and formal. Jax, he corrected without looking up. Mr. McAllister was my father. He was an accountant. He would have hated all this. Zara ignored him. I have run 22 million unique simulations of your proposed mission. In every single one, the outcome is catastrophic failure. The confidence interval is statistically absolute. So you're telling me there's a chance? Jax said, flipping a switch. The ship's internal lights flickered and settled on a warm yellow glow. This matter requires the utmost gravity, she snapped, her Zelian accent thickening. The osmotic pressure differential alone between your vessel's interior and the Emperor's plasma will create microfractures in your hull. If a macrophage identifies you, it will treat you as an invading pathogen and subject you to phagocytosis. It will, in your crew's terms, eat you alive. The velocity within the aortic arch will tear your ship apart. She thrust the datapad toward him. It showed a horrifyingly detailed animation of the splinter. Crushed, dissolved, and shredded in a dozen different ways. Jax glanced at the screen, then back at his console. Neat graphics. Look, Doc, Zara, right? I appreciate the concern. But your simulations assume a standard ship, standard pilot, standard situation. This is none of those things. The splinter is tougher than she looks. And I'm a better pilot than your computers think we'll be fine. Your overconfidence is a liability my simulations cannot account for, she insisted, her voice trembling with anger and genuine fear. You're going to kill him. Jack stopped. He turned to face her fully, his expression serious, the easygoing humor gone. The Emperor is already dying, Zara. Your way. He dies for sure in 4 rotations, hooked up to a bunch of machines that can't help him. My way. He has a shot. A crazy, long, stupid shot, but it's a chance. I owe him that much. He turned back to his controls. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to sync the splinter to the palace retrieval pad. Anyone standing next to the emitter without shielding is going to regret it. Zillions first. Zara stood her ground for a moment, clutching her datapad. Every instinct, every scrap of her scientific training screamed at her to stop this. But the finality of his posture, and the Emperor's unshakable decree, defeated her. She turned and walked down the ramp. Jax watched her go in a reflection on the screen, then shook his head and sealed the cockpit canopy. The ship's reactor thrum deepened as he began the synchronization sequence for the miniaturization rig. At the ramp's bottom, Zara stopped, out of his line of sight. She shifted her gaze from the absurd little ship to a massive sterile crate nearby, labeled Emergency Biological Diagnostic Kit. A frantic, desperate calculation appeared in her eyes. A reckless, unprofessional idea took root in her logical mind. Beneath the ship, an Imperial tech crew rolled a squat, ring-shaped emitter array into position, then locked it to the deck with a clank that echoed through the bay. The pad's status lights blinked in a calm, ready rhythm, keyed to the splinter's return signal. Zara's path was clear, her resolve hardened. She would be there. She could monitor the Emperor's internal state from the inside, provide real-time biological data, and maybe, just maybe, prevent Jax's blundering from causing immediate, irreparable harm. It was a violation of a dozen protocols, but protocol was letting the Emperor die. With a jolt of energy foreign to her, she grabbed the heavy crate's magnetic handle and wrestled it up the splinter's ramp. The main entry hatch was still open. She shoved the crate into the small, cramped aft compartment, a space barely large enough for storage. Panting with exertion, she slipped in after it, slid the aft bulkhead hatch shut behind her, and immediately began unlatching her crate. Inside was a portable, hardened version of her workstation, much more than a simple diagnostic kit. Her jaw set. She bolted her instruments directly to the ship's deck plating with unsteady fingers. She had become an unwanted passenger. Zara snapped herself into a cargo harness as warning tones chirped through the deck, her hands still unsteady from the last bolt she'd tightened. The miniaturization field enveloped the splinter in a shimmering cocoon of incandescent blue light. Outside the ship, the hangar bay warped and twisted as if seen through a broken lens. The fabric of space-time compressed around them. Inside, Jax's jaw tightened as the ship groaned under the strain, lights flickering violently. The drone zipped around the cockpit, emitting a stream of high-pitched panic beeps. "Yeah, I feel it too, buddy," Jax muttered, hands steady on the controls. "Just hold on." Through the main viewport, the world outside ballooned to gargantuan proportions. A maintenance droid on the hangar's far side swelled to the size of a skyscraper, then a mountain range. The rivets in the floor plates became vast craters. A single forgotten bolt lying on the deck loomed like a derelict dreadnought. The ship was the size of a dust mote, floating in a universe that had once been a room. The field's crackling energy subsided, replaced by a stable thrum. Procedure complete. Phase 1 done, Jack said, letting out a breath. Now for the fun part. He ran a quick post-shrink scan. Everything was green, except for a small anomalous energy signature and a mass reading flickering from the aft compartment. It hadn't shown up in his earlier sweep. With a frown, Jax unstrapped himself. Marv, take the helm. The drone beeped affirmative and hovered over the controls. Jax made his way through the narrow corridor that connected the cockpit to the ship's aft. He squeezed past a leaking coolant pipe he'd been meaning to fix and pushed open the door to the aft compartment. He froze. There, surrounded by an array of sophisticated scientific equipment, now securely bolted to the floor, sat Zara. A silver form-fitting environment suit lay folded beside her, helmet resting in her lap. She blinked her multifaceted eyes at him, expression a mixture of defiance and terror. Jack stared at her monitors, already displaying tumbling streams of biological data, at the empty space on his deck where he used to keep his emergency supply of instant noodles. "You have got to be kidding me," he said, voice flat with disbelief. Zara lifted her chin, a gesture of Zillion pride. "The Emperor's well-being is my primary concern. I am here to provide essential biological oversight and prevent you from, for instance, accidentally severing his primary cardiac artery because you mistake it for a tunnel." Jax ran a hand through his hair. "Do you have any idea how many rules you just broke? Stowaways, unauthorized modification of my ship, shrinking yourself without a medical waiver." "The Emperor's decree gave you all necessary resources," she countered smoothly. "You may consider me a resource." For a long moment, Jax just looked at her, a dozen angry retorts dying on his lips. He could be furious. He should be furious. But looking at her, strapped into a makeshift science station in the back of his junk heap ship about to plunge into a living being, his anger gave way to weary, exasperated respect. He sighed. "Fine. You're a resource. But so much as touch my coffee maker, and you're a resource I'm jettisoning out the airlock. Strap in, Doc. It's going to be a bumpy ride." He turned and headed back to the cockpit, leaving Zara stunned but with a visible easing of tension as she secured herself for the next terrifying phase. The insane human was letting her stay. That was a start. A colossal medical drone, now the size of a moon, plucked the splinter from the hangar floor with a tractor beam. It carried them toward the Emperor's exposed arm, where a vein pulsed like a great subterranean river beneath a translucent layer of skin. A syringe, its needleless silver spire dwarfing their ship, descended toward them. It drew them into its chamber, suspended in a clear, viscous fluid. Beyond the transparent shielding, the Emperor lay in the same sealed bay, respirator canopy angled toward the retrieval pad's capture volume, ready to turn a breath into a controlled extraction stream. Alerts threw them against their restraints as the drone ejected them. Darkness, and then chaos. They were in the river of life. The current violently seized the splinter, tossed end over end in a torrent of plasma the color of liquid gold. Jax wrestled with the controls, his grip tightening. The drone zipped around the cockpit, studying flickering consoles with tiny magnetic clamps. "Whoa, okay, that's a bit of a current." Jax yelled over the roar of the ship's thrusters fighting the flow. Through the viewport, a breathtaking and terrifying landscape unfolded. Colossal disc-shaped objects surrounded them, each many times larger than their ship. Red blood cells tumbling through the plasma like a fleet of derelict saucers. Great amoeboid shapes of white blood cells drifted past like living clouds patrolling the biological freeway. "We are in the brachial vein," Zara crackled over internal comm, a strange mix of clinical analysis and unadulterated awe. "Heading toward the superior vena cava. Velocity is approximately 120 centimeters per second. The force is magnificent." "Glad you're enjoying the scenery, Doc," Jax grunted, executing a sharp barrel roll to avoid a head-on collision with a biconcave disc the size of a city block. "I'm a little busy trying not to become a smear on a passing platelet." Zara, despite the violent ride, had her face pressed against the small viewport in her compartment. Her instruments were absorbing terabytes of data every second. Incredible. Oxygen saturation lower than expected, confirming systemic hypoxia. Look to starboard, a T lymphocyte. Its surface receptors are actively scanning for foreign antigens. Keep it from touching us. Yeah, I got it. Avoid the big spiky death cloud. Jax shot back, nudging thrusters to put distance between them and the immune cell. The current swept them into a wider channel, the flow becoming slightly less turbulent. Before them, the vessel wall opened into a vast, cavernous space. The thunderous, rhythmic booming, a constant backdrop, grew deafening. The right atrium, Zara breathed. We are in the Emperor's heart. The flow pulled them through a set of massive, billowing valves that opened and closed like the gates to a mythic kingdom, then plunged them into another chamber and violently expelled them into a new, faster river. The pulmonary artery headed for the lungs. They shot through branching vessels into the lungs' tight capillary web, then spilled into the pulmonary veins and back into the heart again. This time through the left side. One crushing, thunderous contraction later, the heart hurled the splinter into the aorta and its violent curves. The aortic arch whipped past like a living canyon as Jax fought to keep them off the walls. For what felt like hours, they rode the currents. Jax's initial tension eased into a focused rhythm as he anticipated surges and rode the eddies, a navigator on the most bizarre ocean in the universe. And Zara, his unwanted passenger, had become his indispensable guide. Her fascinated, if horrified, biological commentary was the only map they had. Their bickering had transformed into strange, efficient shorthand, a symbiotic dance of piloting instinct and scientific knowledge. After a journey that felt like an eternity, they reached their destination. Following Zara's guidance, Jax navigated out of the main circulatory routes and into the smaller, delicate capillary networks that fed the Emperor's primary thoracic nerve ganglion. Here, the torrent became a gentle stream, red blood cells squeezing through narrow vessels in single file. The capillary forced the splinter to follow suit, hull scraping against soft living walls. The affliction centers in the ganglion just ahead, Zara said over the comm, her voice now laced with professional tension. My external scans show the highest concentration of anomalous energy radiating from this region. All right, keeping my eyes peeled for whatever it is we're looking for, Jax replied, easing the ship forward. It didn't take long to find it. Structures utterly alien to his biology wove through the Emperor's tissue fabric. They were infinitesimal, fibrous strands of light, thin as spider silk, pulsing with a faint internal blue-white glow. They threaded through vessel walls, bypassed cells, and formed a delicate, shimmering web that looked disturbingly like a deliberate piece of engineering. By the crystalline sages, Zara whispered, her voice full of disbelief. What is that? It's not biological. The material composition, my scanners can't even classify it. It seems to be solidified energy. Jax brought the splinter to a near halt, hovering beside a glowing thread. It's a network, a power grid, or a highway system. He was right. The strands were active conduits. Tiny, shimmering motes of light traveled along them, flowing in controlled pathways. The network seemed to be siphoning trace amounts of bioelectric energy from surrounding nerve cells, using it to power itself. They've tapped into his nervous system, Jax muttered. This isn't a disease, it's an infestation. They followed a larger strand as it wove along the capillary wall. Ahead, the thread diverged, plunging directly into tissue. It led to a perfectly constructed opening, a sort of built-in valve in the capillary lining, surrounded by a shimmering collar of the same fibrous material. The valve was closed, but as the splinter approached, drawn by the faint current flowing along the strand, it dilated open, an iris of light contracting to grant them passage. It's an invitation, Jax said, voice tight with unease. Or a trap, Zara countered, though her scientific curiosity was palpable. The pressure outside the vessel is significantly lower. If we pass through, there's no guarantee we can get back into the bloodstream. The core of the network must be on the other side. Jax looked at the glowing portal. His mission was to knock on the problem's door. This looked a lot like a doorbell. Hold on to your hat, Doc. He nudged the splinter forward, through the shimmering valve and out of the river of life. The transition was jarring. They slipped out of dense plasma and into a vast open space. For a moment, they drifted in a slow, drag-heavy fall through a warm, humid atmosphere. The ship's external sensors registered oxygen, nitrogen, and a dozen exotic biological gases. They were in a pocket, a cavernous space held open between the Emperor's massive organ tissue lobes. The cavern walls were glistening, pinkish-gray surfaces of living cells, and holding them apart, the shimmering, intricate web of light strands. And from that web rose a city. Before them, stretching out into the biological haze, was a breathtaking, sprawling metropolis of light. Towers constructed from woven energy strands soared upward, their peaks lost in the misty distance. Glowing roads and bridges connected floating districts that pulsed with soft internal luminescence. Millions of microscopic beings, appearing as tiny motes of light themselves, swarmed through the city, piloting needlepoint vehicles along the glowing pathways. To Jax and Zara, traveling through a world of giant, mindless cells, the sight was profoundly shocking. This was a civilization. Intricate. Alive. Up close, what seemed microscopic from the outside was a world with its own sense of scale. The individual inhabitants might be micro-small, but to them, their towers were mountains. Their vehicles were real. And the splinter, hanging silently in their sky, was a terrifying, colossal invader. "It's beautiful," Zara breathed. Her scientific objectivity completely overwhelmed by sheer unbelievable wonder. Jax didn't answer. He was staring at the city, at its intricate, deliberate design, and at the weapon emplacements built into the towers, all of which were turning to aim directly at them. A shrill alarm from the cockpit cut him short. Multiple craft launches detected. The drone beeped, synthesized voice tight with panic. From the city's glowing heart, a swarm erupted. A cloud of tiny, aggressive craft, insect-like and menacing, moved with singular hostile purpose. They closed the distance in seconds. Pinpoints of intense light, laser beams no bigger than a needle tip, strafed the splinter's hull. From the inside, it sounded like a hailstorm of pebbles, but each impact left a deep, sizzling score mark on the ship's plating. "Shields buckling under focused fire," Jax yelled, throwing the ship into a hard, evasive dive. He weaved through the biological landscape, using massive nerve bundles as cover, but the swarm was too fast, too numerous. A concentrated volley struck the port side. A high-pitched scream of tearing metal echoed through the ship. A red light flashed on Jax's console. "Hull breach, non-critical section, Engineering Bay 3, the drone reported. "Seal it," Jax commanded. A heavy shutter slammed down over the affected area, a thick bubbling foam flooding the seam, hardening almost instantly. The hissing of escaping air stopped. The quick fix had worked, but it had cost them a significant chunk of power reserves. Damaged, exposed, and hopelessly outmatched, the swarm trapped them. Jax's most creative evasive maneuvers were failing. The swarm herded them, cutting off every escape route. A thick blue energy beam lashed out from the city's central spire. A tractor beam, designed to capture, not destroy. It locked onto the splinter with an immovable grip, killing their momentum instantly. The ship's engine screamed in protest, then whined into silence as Jax cut power to prevent burnout. The beam caught them, dragged them helplessly through the air, away from the Emperor's familiar tissue and into the city's glowing, hostile heart. The tractor beam deposited the splinter onto a vast circular platform in the city's center, releasing them with a jarring thud. The swarm of enemy craft hovered in a perfect, menacing perimeter around them. For a long moment, nothing happened. "Okay, new plan," Jax said, unbuckling his harness. "We go out there, we talk to them, and we politely ask them to stop killing my friend. A polite conversation will enrage them." Zara's strained voice came over the comm. "Got a better idea?" Jax asked. "Because I'm all out of running away and taking fire." He pulled an environment suit from a locker behind him. Zara yanked a handheld scanner module free from her bolted station. hugging it to her chest like the only solid thing left in this insane plan. Suit up. No idea what's in the air out there, but I doubt it's filtered. Jax snapped seals into place and nodded once. These suits carry real personal shielding. My ship's shields are a patchwork. Don't mix them up. In the aft compartment, Zara wrestled into the silver suit she'd brought and sealed her helmet with shaking hands. They sealed their helmets. Jax cycled the main hatch. The ramp lowered with a groan. The city's light was brilliant, the air filled with a low, resonant hum, the collective sound of 1,000,000 tiny lives. Standing on the platform, waiting for them, was a contingent of armed guards, biomechanical constructs, humanoid in shape, but built from the same material as the city. Each had a single glowing red eye fixed on the intruders. They carried rifles that pulsed with contained energy. Jax walked down the ramp first, holding his hand up in a universal gesture of non-aggression. Zara followed, her movements stiff with apprehension, clutching her multi-scanner to her chest like a holy relic. The guards remained silent. One gestured with its weapon, a clear command to follow. They escorted Jax and Zara off the platform and onto a translucent walkway that wound through alien architecture. They walked past structures that defied gravity, past streams of the city's inhabitants who stopped and stared at the towering, clumsy giants in their midst. The strangeness was dizzying. They were microbes walking through a civilization of microbes. Their escort led them into a vast central chamber. It resembled a central processing hub more than a throne room. Zara's scanner worked frantically, mapping energy flows, building a coherent schematic from overwhelming data. Strands of energy crisscrossed the chamber, all converging on a raised dais in the center. Upon that dais sat a large, intricate construct, a being of woven energy and fiber that pulsed with a slow, ancient rhythm. A single entity, yet it seemed to contain a multitude. The leader. As they approached, Zara worked faster. Their communication seems to be modulated frequencies combined with complex energy field fluctuations. This language is beyond my universal translator's capacity. I might be able to create a crude signal bridge. Brute force translation by mapping their energy patterns to our linguistic structures. It will be imperfect. Imperfect is better than nothing, Jax said, coming to a halt before the dais. Do it. Zara aimed her scanner. A beam of focused analytical energy enveloped the central being. For a moment, only a wash of static from their helmet comms. Then a synthesized voice emerged, fragmented, layered with the crackle of raw data forced into meaning. Invaders, sanctum violators, you have damaged the great host. The entity on the dais pulsed with a soft, angry red. We're here to help, Jax shot back, his voice broadcasting automatically on the frequency Zara had opened. We're here because he's dying. You're the problem. This whole city, this network, you're killing him. We are the symbionts. We inhabit Great Host. We preserve their consciousness, their memory in exchange for shelter. Zara looked up from her scanner, eyes wide beyond her visor. They're a symbiotic species, Jax. Or they're supposed to be. The leader, the progenitor, seemed to focus its attention on them. Your presence is a catalyst. You have fanned the flames of our own conflict. Conflict? Jax asked. What are you talking about? Your arrival, fast-handed. The Transcendents feared you would expose them, so they rushed the breach before we could contain them. The progenitor pulsed with a somber deep blue. This host is old. His tissues decay. His life fades. Our arrival was too late. My children are divided. The progenitor's translation painted a grim picture, a society on the brink of civil war. Her faction, the traditionalists, wished to honor the ancient code, to coexist, to stabilize the host as best they could, to preserve his consciousness as a living library, even if it meant they would fade away with him. But they were losing. A larger, more aggressive faction, the expansionists, saw the Emperor's failing body as a final precious resource. They wanted to strip his tissues for raw materials, harvest bioenergy from his cells to fuel their growth. construct a great siege ship to escape the dying world and find a new healthy host. They were the ones who fired on the splinter, seeing it as a threat to their harvest. And a third faction, a small but radical group of zealots, the Transcendents. They believed in a different path. Using web-grown technology to wire themselves directly into the Emperor's nervous system, bypassing the need for a physical body, they sought to merge their collective consciousness with the Emperor's, to seize control of his mind, to pilot his body as a new, hybrid form of existence, the expansionists' uncontrolled growth, the Transcendents' aggressive intrusion. Every surge of their expansion chews the host from the inside, the progenitor concluded, her light dimming with sorrow. We are the ailment, because we are divided on the cure. The city's resonant hum shattered, replaced by a blaring, discordant alarm. Red light flashed through the chamber, casting frantic, dancing shadows. A smaller construct, a messenger, shot into the chamber, emitting a series of high-frequency pulses at the progenitor. The progenitor flared with a brilliant, panicked crimson. The Transcendents, they have made their move. They have breached the final synaptic gate. They are seizing the motor cortex. Back in the central healing sanctum, a universe away, Grand Vizier Kalen watched in horror as the Emperor's body convulsed. A low moan escaped the monarch's throat, limbs twitching, then seizing violently. Alarms shrieked from medical monitors. "What is happening?" Kalen demanded, turning on terrified medical adepts. "A massive, unsynchronized neural pulse, High Counselor," one reported, voice shaking. "It's like a lightning storm in his brain. We're losing him." Kalen stared at the Emperor's thrashing form. His rigid certainty shattered into raw panic. The human's insane mission had failed. It had made everything infinitely worse. In the city's heart, Jax watched chaos erupt. The progenitor tried to rally loyalist forces, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. This was his one chance. He stepped forward, placing himself directly in line of sight. "Listen to me," he yelled, cutting through the alarms. "Your little civil war is about to end, because you're all going to be homeless. You know what happens when he dies." The progenitor paused, her light focused on him. "The host ceases to be." "There's more to it than that," Jack shot back. He looked at Zara. "Doc, give her the gruesome details. Tell her what actually happens." Zara, snapping out of her shock, stepped forward and began feeding data through her scanner. Her voice was clinical, exact, utterly terrifying. Upon the host's life, function ceasing, a process known as autolysis begins. The host's own enzymes will digest cells from the inside out. Putrefaction will follow, anaerobic bacteria from the digestive tract multiplying and spreading through the circulatory system. Within 3 of your host orbits, this entire environment, your city, your people, everything, will become a liquefied necrotic mass, a puddle of organic waste. A wave of disturbed, flickering light passed through the progenitor. The concept was clearly alien and horrifying. "All your paths lead to ruin," Jax pressed, seizing the advantage. "If the Transcendents take over, the Valthor outside will put them down like rabid animals. If the expansionists try to build their ship, they'll run out of time and rot the rest of you. Your only chance is to work with me." He pointed a gauntleted finger at her. "You help me stop the Transcendents. Right now. You help me save his life, and I promise you, I will negotiate a real, permanent, symbiotic relationship for your people. As partners, I'll talk to the big guy. He'll listen to me." The progenitor regarded him, her light swirling with a complex equation of risk and possibility. She had seen the human's recklessness, but she had also heard the conviction in his voice, and the horrifying logic in the Zillion's words. Her people were facing extinction. "You offer a path where all others have failed," she transmitted, her light solidifying into a determined bright white. "Then, human, we will forge an accord. My loyalists are yours. Stop the Transcendents. Save the host. Save us all." The battle for the Emperor's motor cortex was a chaotic war on multiple fronts. Jax, Zara, and a small elite force of loyalist warriors raced through the city's woven pathways, headed for the nerve ganglion that served as the gateway to the Emperor's higher brain functions. Expansionist and transcendent combined forces blocked their path, seeing the alliance as a threat to both their plans. Tiny, vicious dogfights erupted in cavernous spaces between nerve bundles as loyalist fighters engaged the enemy swarm. Jax was the trump card. Their pinpoint lasers sizzled harmlessly against his environment suit. He became a one-man demolition crew. "They've barricaded the primary axon tract," a loyalist transmitted, as they came upon a massive wall of fibrous energy blocking their path. "No, they haven't," Jax grunted. He lowered his shoulder and charged. With a sound like shattering glass, the wall exploded into a shower of light fragments. He stomped through the breach, clearing a path for the others. But it was Zara who turned him from a blunt instrument into a focused weapon. From behind the lines, her face a mask of intense concentration, she used her deep knowledge of Valthor neurobiology to guide him. Her scanner gave her a view of the battlefield that no one else had, showing the Emperor's underlying living brain architecture. "Jax, the enemy fighters are drawing power from the synaptic junction 20 paces to your left," her voice crackled in his helmet. "Disrupt it, and you'll cause a system-wide blackout in this sector." "On it." He waded through enemy ground troops, biomechanical constructs that swarmed around his boots like angry insects, and brought his heavy boot down on the exact spot Zara had indicated. A massive tract of enemy webwork went dark. Their fighters tumbled from the air, powerless. They fought their way forward, a bizarre and effective team. The humans' brute force, the Zillions' intellect, the symbionts' resolve. They broke through into the motor cortex's central chamber, a cathedral of nerve pathways, great axons pulsing with the light of the Emperor's thoughts. In the center, a huge spidery construct, the Transcendent Leader, was physically merged with a primary nerve bundle. Its woven limbs sunk deep into living tissue. Elite guards surrounded it. Energy arced from its body into the ganglion, and every pulse made the Emperor's body, a universe away, thrash in agony. As Jax and the Loyalists engaged the guards, Zara pushed her scanner to its limits, desperate to get a full energy reading of what the Transcendent Leader was channeling. She had to understand the mechanism if they were to have any hope of reversing it. The data flowed onto her screen, a chaotic waterfall of numbers. But as her algorithm sorted it, a pattern emerged. An unbelievable pattern. "Jax, stop!" she screamed over the comm. "That energy signature, it's regenerative." Jax was locked in combat with two of the leader's guards, using a piece of shattered wall as a club. He paused, confused. "They got a funny way of showing it, Doc." "Their technology is a healing method," Zara explained, voice breathless with discovery. "They detected the cellular decay in the host, and they're trying to reverse it. They're pumping raw life energy into his dying cells to jumpstart them. But their methods are too aggressive, too chaotic. It's like trying to perform microsurgery with a sledgehammer. The energy overload is what's causing the seizures." The pieces clicked into place in Jax's mind. Their motive was desperation, their methods clumsy. He threw the slab of woven material aside, ignoring the guards. He charged directly at the Transcendent Leader. The construct turned, firing a bolt of raw energy that splashed harmlessly off Jax's suit shielding. Before it could fire again, Jax reached it, grabbed the entire spidery construct in his two hands, and wrenched it loose from the nerve bundles. Its embedded interface tore free with a sickening squelch. He slammed the leader against the wall, pinning it there. "Everybody stop!" he roared, his voice booming through the chamber. The fighting faltered. Everyone, organic and constructed, turned to the human giant holding their leader captive. Jax held up a hand, calling for quiet. "Listen to me, you glowing blockheads," he yelled, making sure his comm was broadcasting to everyone. He relayed Zara's discovery. His words, simple, blunt, and powerful. "You're all trying to fix a dying clock, but you're fighting over who gets to hit it with a hammer. He jabbed a thumb toward Zara, "can show you how to use a screwdriver. You want to save this place? Save yourselves? Stop fighting each other and start working together. Let her show you how to heal him properly." How to become a symbiotic immune system. The transcendent leader, pinned and helpless, ceased its struggles. The expansionists lowered their weapons. Zara's scanner chirped as her model converged. Your seed ship timeline does not beat autolysis, she snapped into the shared channel. Not here, not with a host this far gone. Stabilize him first, and you buy time. Keep tearing him down, and you guarantee rot takes you mid-build. The logic was undeniable. Faced with the truth of their self-destructive actions, presented with a new path, the conflict died. They called a truce. The factions, weary of a war that was killing their world, agreed. The change was immediate and profound. Under Zara's guidance, the unified symbionts turned their formidable technology from a weapon of civil war into an instrument of healing. They repurposed aggressive energy conduits, focused chaotic growth. They became a coordinated microscopic legion of surgeons. Guided by Zara's deep understanding of Valthor biology, they targeted the root of the Emperor's decay, reinforced dying cell walls, cleared necrotic tissue, pumped calibrated gentle waves of regenerative energy through his nervous system. In the central healing sanctum, the effect was immediate. The Emperor's violent seizures ceased. His thrashing limbs grew still. Shrieking alarms fell silent, replaced by climbing readouts. Tissues were regenerating. Nerve pathways were firing in stable, healthy patterns. The Emperor's life signs improved at a rate that defied all known biology. Decades of aging seemed to reverse in minutes. Kalen looked from the monitors to the silent, ugly ship sitting in the nearby hangar bay. And for the first time in his long, orderly life, awe washed over him for something he could not possibly understand. Down in the world within, crisis averted, it was time to go home. The symbionts, now working in perfect harmony, swarmed over the splinter. Using their construction abilities, they sealed the hull breach completely, replacing it with a woven material stronger than the original plating. Jax and Zara stood before the progenitor one last time. You have given my people a new purpose, the progenitor transmitted. Her light a calm, steady blue. We have become guardians. The host's life is our life. We will protect him. See that you do, Jax said, with a nod of respect. He's a good man, for a giant bug emperor. The progenitor's light shimmered in what could have been amusement. The symbionts guided them to their extraction point, a large alveolar sac deep within the Emperor's left lung, a vast dome chamber with soft, permeable walls. Zara, using her suit's low-power comm, established a weak but stable link with the medical team outside. Advise the attending medical team and High Counselor Kalen to trigger a controlled complete exhalation in 48 seconds, she instructed, voice crisp and professional. They sealed themselves back inside the splinter. The countdown reached 0, a universe away. The Emperor took a deep, controlled breath in, and then exhaled. A gale force wind caught the ship. A warm rush of air shot them up through bronchial tubes and out into the open. For a heart-stopping moment, they were flying through the sealed recovery bay's immense space. The keyed retrieval pad on the bay floor snapped to life, locking them in a retrieval field. A flash of blue light, a nauseating sensation of rapid, uncontrolled expansion, and the splinter slammed down onto the hangar deck with a deafening clang, back at its full, ugly size. The hangar was utterly silent. The ramp lowered. Jax McAllister and Zara walked out, helmets under their arms, into the stunned, disbelieving stares of the entire Valthor royal court. Weeks later, the sky above the Valthor capital was a serene tapestry of violet and rose. On a tranquil spire garden, high atop the imperial palace, a fully restored Emperor Thaler stood beside Jax McAllister. The Emperor looked younger, more vibrant than he had in centuries. The crimson of his exoskeleton shone with renewed health. He moved with fluid grace long lost to age. They shared a drink, a bubbling, phosphorescent nectar, a Valthor delicacy. The silence between them was comfortable, the easy quiet of old friends. It is the most peculiar sensation, Thaler said, his voice a smooth, resonant hum. There is a constant faint vibration within me, A hum of activity, a feeling of partnership. I can hear them, as feelings, not words, a sense of vigilance. They are managing my body's systems with an efficiency my own biology has lost. They are reversing decay. It seems my new tenants are quite determined to protect their home. Jax took a sip of his drink, tasted vaguely of mangoes and static electricity. Sounds like you got the best roommates in the galaxy. They clean. They do repairs. They don't leave dishes in the sink. The Emperor let out a genuine hearty chuckle. Indeed. A most astute observation. A sleek shuttle passed below them, its lights tracing a path through the twilight city. He turned to Jax, expression growing serious. I have summoned the scribes. We are composing a new imperial edict, the McAllister Accord. It will grant you any title, any reward, any territory you wish. Our histories will honor your name for all time. It is the least I can do to repay you for my life. It also recognizes the symbionts as lawful, symbiotic citizens of the Empire, bound by oath to guard my life, and granted the protections of a housed people. Your promise will not hang on air. Don't worry about it, Big Z, Jax said, leaning on the railing, looking out at stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. We were even a long time ago. This was just a bonus round. The Emperor smiled, a complex, grateful gesture of his mouth parts. Perhaps. But I must acknowledge a gift. I must give gratitude its proper voice. Allow an old man his ceremonies. Jax, I have been preparing a speech for weeks. He turned away for a moment, looking out at the cosmos, gathering his thoughts for the grand, formal oration he was about to deliver. He wanted every word to be perfect. When he turned back, the chair beside him was empty. Jax was gone. Thaler listened and caught it at last. The faintest retreat of footsteps on garden stone, already swallowed by the wind and the height. All that remained was Jax's half-finished glass of glowing nectar, sitting on the railing, condensation beating on its side. The Emperor stared at the empty space for a long moment, unsurprised, unoffended. He felt a deep, profound amusement. It was so perfectly, so characteristically Jax. He left before the parades, the medals, the speeches. His job was done. His friend was safe. That was the only reward he ever cared about. A slow, knowing smile spread across the Emperor's ancient face. He picked up his own glass, and then Jax's, holding them both. He looked out at the vast, star-dusted darkness of the galaxy, the same view Jax had admired just a moment before. He raised the glass in a quiet toast, to the empty air. Until next time, my friend, he said. If you made it this far, you know that sometimes the craziest ideas are the only ones that work. Hit like if you believe in trusting the outsider, and subscribe to Ascension of Man for more stories where humanity refuses to follow the rules.